Holy crap. Man, my hair is so poofy. So fucking poofy, dude. My bangs literally go all the way like down to like my goddamn eyes basically now. US Civil War, surprising soldiers from extra history. So we're back in the US Civil War. We're doing this and the Rome in 20 minutes video. So those things are coming out, some nice girl stuff, and then some shit posting for the other channel. So get ready for that. And let's get into it, dude. This should be some more interesting things to learn about the Civil War. If you thought that you knew enough, you didn't. And one of my favorite things about history is just how much you can learn. You know, there are just so many things to learn about history, and you can never know it all. You know, so you have to consider, you know, I used to read a lot of Herodotus back in high school, and one of the things you learn is, you know, when you have colorized history, you know, history that's not just facts, but it's like storytelling, the perspective really matters. So there's gonna be a million different characters you can always learn about, and you can read about the same historical facts over and over again and get a different perspective and learn something new every time. So I really enjoy that. So let's get into it, man. I love these Civil War vids.
Pennsylvania, 1891. A group of Union veterans converged to bury one of their own, Thomas Sylvanus. Sylvanus fought at the battles of Mine Run, the Wilderness, and Spotsylvania. He was in the color guard when the 81st Pennsylvania charged the breastworks at Cold Harbor. And when the rest of his detail fell, he took the national colors from the hands of a wounded man and carried them the rest of the day. Captured during the siege of Petersburg, he survived starvation and abuse in Andersonville prison, then returned to Pennsylvania after the war to marry and make a home. He became naturalized, voted, and drew his pension like any other old soldier. But the name on his gravestone was an adopted title to match his adopted land. In his home country, Thomas Sylvanus was known as Ah Yi Wei, born in Hong Kong on the 4th of July, 1845.
Really? What? That's good. That is so good. If you guys are here for the last extra history video that I did it twice, once with myself and then once with Skidden. This dude is amazing storytelling.
When we think of soldiers serving in the US Civil War, we usually conjure up a certain image, one instilled by documentaries, novels, and films.
Exactly what I'm talking about, yeah.
The troops we picture are largely white, or in the case of the US colored troops, black. Or on occasion, sometimes we highlight the service of recent European immigrants who came fleeing the instability that followed from the Irish potato famine or revolutions of 1848. But there were also others serving in the armies of the United States and the rebel Confederacy. People that the wider public is only beginning to learn about, and whose incredible stories historians are beginning to bring to light. And that's important, because in looking at these stories, we get a better picture of America at the time of the Civil War.
And I think it's so difficult too to understand how incredibly biased in my generation history is. And like people go throughout the rest of their lives not even considering that fact. And it's something that like I try to bring to people's attention all the time. Like you need to figure out who is writing the information you're getting, where they're getting that information from, and like whose point of view is that? What kind of morals are they trying to instill with that? What kind of worldview are they trying to sell to you, you know, when they're telling that story, not just the facts?
Today, we're going to do just that. Because while troops like Thomas Sylvanus were rare, they were not unheard of. Research has started to uncover more veterans from Asia and the Pacific Islands, many of which had escaped earlier historical accounts because they enlisted under English names.
That makes sense.
In fact, the National Park Service has begun keeping a list to try to collate and verify their service records. And as of this episode, it has over 300 names.
That is awesome!
Looking at the US Navy enlistment rolls, you'll see men with birthplaces like Bombay, Shanghai, Java, Singapore, Lahore, Manila, Samoa, and Tahiti.
Wow.
Men whose naval captains either hired in foreign ports or lured them away from the whaling industry. But sadly, we know little about these men except for their dates of enlistment and discharge. Those who fought in the infantry, by contrast, gained a certain amount of media attention.
That makes sense.
Two Chinese infantrymen, Joseph Pierce and John Tomney, fought at Gettysburg. Pierce survived, but Tomney, renowned in his unit for humor and personal bravery, died in the peach orchard when cannon shot severed both of his legs. His obituary ran in the New York Times. A few Asians served in the Confederacy as well. A group of Filipinos living near New Orleans enlisted in a Louisiana regiment. And before the war, Chang and Ang Bunker, the original Siamese twins, who hailed from present-day Thailand, retired from show business, and bought a plantation in North Carolina. When the South seceded, each had a son join a cavalry regiment.
That's
But
awesome.
of all the Pacific nations, the Kingdom of Hawaii sent the most men into combat.
That's true.
Though officially neutral, Hawaii's links with New England whalers and missionaries made it a hotbed for abolitionism. In mock presidential elections, Lincoln polled better in Honolulu than in the U.S.
Really?
And when one Southern-born resident dared to fly a Confederate flag, her neighbors tore it down. Over 100 Hawaiians and Hawaiian-born Americans served in the U.S. Army and Navy during the war, signing up for adventure, money, or to battle
Jesus
slavery.
Lord.
The highest ranking was General Samuel Armstrong, the Hawaiian-born son of New England missionaries who rose to command an African-American regiment. And in the trenches of Petersburg, he was shocked to run into native Hawaiian soldiers serving as privates with the U.S. colored troops. One soldier had links to the royal family, and some of these men stayed in the army even after the war, joining the infamous African-American Buffalo Soldiers.
Hey.
But there were
So Hawaii is one of those interesting places because throughout history, there's been a lot of strife with the people who live there about, you know, the occupation of Americans and Europeans, you know, in their native, you know, on their native home. And that's why in World War II that there are so many interesting stories where even during internment, there's a lot of people, you know, a lot of people who want to lay low. There's a lot of people who want to fight and enlist, and there are a lot of people who want to abstain altogether until they get the respect that they deserve. So Hawaii is always a really interesting place to talk
who
about.
fought closer to home. March 28, 1862, Glorieta Pass, New Mexico Territory. Two men look down from the top of the mesa, hearing gunfire in the distance. One is the commander of a Colorado unit, but he's been brought here by Lieutenant Colonel Manuel Chavez,
Hey, what's
whose
up?
largely Mexican-American
Yeah.
outfit, the 2nd New Mexico Volunteers, know this area well. Many
I
of their
would look him
families
up.
have lived
I
in
don't
the
wanna
area since
get
the
distracted.
1600s, when the Spanish established missions there. In fact, they'd lived in Mexico where slavery was illegal, until the border moved south after the Mexican-American War. Now they were Americans fighting for the Union.
Crazy.
But they know
That's crazy.
that some of the enemy below them are Mexican-Americans as well. Those who had chosen the other side due to differing beliefs, economic ties to the South, or anger at the U.S. government.
But it's that same issue over and over again. Like, how do you fight against your friends just because of differing political beliefs? It's a story that you had to have. I mean, I had to apply to Hawaiians and Filipinos and things in different cultures that resided in the U.S. at the time. But it's never anything I've ever heard anything about in like 1860. You know, I just never heard the story. So that's still interesting.
At the bottom of the mesa, Chavez sees 200 Confederates guarding a baggage train. Texans who've invaded the New Mexico territory, hoping to seize Union gold mines in Colorado. If that succeeds, they can link Texas with Confederate sympathizers in Southern California, gaining Pacific ports to break the Union's naval blockade.
Right.
Chavez doesn't know it, but the Union has already lost this battle, like it has with the last several. With resources stripped for the war in the East, it seems like the U.S. troops can do nothing to stop this Confederate drive across the Southwest, unless they act. The mesa is steep, so they find anything they can tie together.
Wait, they
Ropes,
climb
lariats,
down?
saddle harnesses, and they begin to descend the cliff.
That's
The
insane.
Confederates see them and open fire with a cannon.
I was about to say, yeah, they're gonna get shot at.
Under a rain of shot, the Union soldiers rope down the steep
Are
mesa
you
and form ranks.
insane?
And once they advance, it's all over. The Confederate baggage train guards scatter. And the main Confederate force, celebrating victory, will return to find their supplies looted and burned. Pack mules killed or scattered.
Damn, those guys are crazy. Could you imagine the thought of like, yo, they're gonna see us. Don't you just want to walk around? And like walking around is basically not an option because they're gonna be gone by the time you get there. That's insane. That is absolutely
And they will
insane.
have no choice but to walk back to El Paso in the hungry grip of winter.
Wow.
This Mexican-American militia has just broken the Confederate invasion of the Southwest. But Hispanic
That's
troops
insane.
served in more areas than just the Southwest. Up to 20,000 of them served as everything from naval officers to blockade runners, spies to engineers.
Really?
In fact, when the Confederacy fired on Fort Sumter, it was a Cuban officer, Colonel Ambrosio Jose Gonzalez, who handled much of the artillery.
Wow.
And in the final clash of the war, conducted after the Confederate government had already fallen, Hispanic Texans served on both sides. When Union sappers blazed a crater in Confederate defenses during the siege of Petersburg, it was the half-Argentinian mining engineer Henry Pleasants who proposed and managed the operation. At Gettysburg, when Pickett's charge smashed into the Union lines at Cemetery Ridge, a color bearer named Joseph de Castro rushed forward into enemy ranks, battling an enemy color bearer hand to hand.
That reminds me so much of Chivalry. I don't know if you guys have played Chivalry, but there are people who play music in Chivalry, and nobody kills them on either side. You know, they just let them play the music as they run around. But that would be like those two dudes just start kicking each other during the battle.
Knocking the man down with his flagpole, he snatched the enemy flag and ran both standards.
Are you kidding me?
Delivering the
It's like real life capture the flag
to his colonel. For his actions, he became the first Hispanic American to receive the Medal of Honor.
I had no idea.
2 Hispanic seamen received the award. One for defending the Union blockade, and the other, a Chilean dispatch runner who was one of only 6 men to breach Confederate defenses during an assault on Fort Fisher. Many men serving in the North were immigrants recently arrived to the U.S., but many Hispanic families who fought on the Confederate side actually predated the Revolution. Hispanic plantation owners living in Florida and Louisiana had settled during the Spanish colonial days, inheriting that empire's own complicated history with slavery.
Right.
And due to their social status, they often served as officers.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, for that would make complete sense, right? Your racial identity would kind of mean nothing if you're already a plantation owner in the South. I mean,
there were people who had been in the United States even longer, who faced a wrenching choice. Nearly 29,000 Native Americans served in the war, fighting on both sides. They were scouts, frontier raiders, sharpshooters, harbor pilots, and crack cavalry. And others served no side, clashing with U.S. Army troops and settlers who abused them and violated agreements. Some tribes that sided with the Confederacy were slaveholders who wanted to maintain their way of life, while others who did the same were disillusioned with the U.S. government due to decades of
the broken treaties, of course.
They pledged military aid to the Confederacy in exchange for a better deal. In fact, this tragic choice of which side to fight for divided the Cherokee Nation, with its principal chief John Ross supporting the Union until ousted and replaced by Stand Watie, who led the nation to war for the Confederacy. It became, in effect, a civil war within a civil war.
See, and it's one of those little things that the video's almost over, but it's one of those things that history is not going to focus on again for moral reasons, right? You want to feel like you had the moral high ground as, like, you know, if you're telling Indian history, to not tell the fact that you had slave owners who still wanted to protect their money, basically their property is what they viewed as property, or wanted to bargain, you know, with the U.S. government by using themselves almost as troops. But historically, you need to paint like a fair picture of how political things plan out, because people feel like now when they tell a story, we're going to finish this, we'll get into that actually.
But that's a story that deserves its whole own episode.
Yeah.
Until then, I'll leave you with this. When Lee and Grant met for the surrender at Appomattox, Lee noticed that the man who drafted the surrender terms was Grant's secretary, the Seneca chief and lieutenant colonel Eli Samuel Parker. I'm glad to see one real American here. Lee quipped. Parker responded, "We're all Americans."
Swag. 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 Extra credit, man. That's fucking great, dude. This guy's got a Patreon, too, if you guys want to support his channel. This guy's amazing. But, yeah, dude, this guy, it points out one of those very real things where, like, everybody feels like they have the moral high ground. Both sides, right? Republicans, Democrats, right? If you want to go with party lines. But if you just pick an issue, everybody feels like they are right. That's why they're arguing. And so they look at historical depictions of things, and it shows the winning side's point of view. And that's why I try to explain to people, like, when you make an argument or you say something, it doesn't mean that you're right. You shouldn't do it thinking that you're right. You should do it thinking that you have a point of view. When you get facts wrong and you get fact checked, that's one thing. That's not that big of a deal. Getting fact checked is just a thing that happens. Fact checking another person doesn't also make you right. There are going to be multiple sides of every issue for multiple reasons, and all of them are valid. It is a valid way to act and be and take action. It doesn't make you invalid if at the end you lose, right? If you watch an anime all the time, the villain says the stronger person, you know, well, it just happened in Black Clover. The dude using the fucking teleportation magic, was literally screaming, if I win, that means I'm right, right? And they show the villain saying that all the time. But people in real life will then win like a political election, or win on voting on a subject, or win getting something funded, and say that means we're right because we made this action or took this action. And that's like an elementary way of thinking of something. It's like, it doesn't make what people are doing right or wrong. Of course, slavery is an issue we all agree on that was wrong at this point. But that doesn't make, at the time, people wanting to protect their investments of slaves necessarily the wrong decision. You know what I mean? That could be the right decision for their family. So it's always interesting to hear all these different sides and then make a moral judgment based on where we're at right now in society. That's what I really like to do. I'm definitely interested in doing that. So I will holler at you then. Peace.
Crocs, 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 Crocs. I'm rocking Crocs. I'm rocking Crocs. I'm rocking Crocs. Wearing Crocs, boy. I'm rocking Crocs. I'm rocking Crocs. I'm rocking Crocs. Wearing Crocs, boy. My Crocs are gold. My pops is old. My Crocs got soul. My Crocs are bold. I go to church wearing Crocs. I'm always turned wearing Crocs. My Crocs are great. Your Crocs are lame. With my Crocs, I can cross a lake. Crocs, 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 Crocs,